the candidates tournament is finally over. It's only taken over a year to complete this tournament in Yekaterinburg. And we now know, of course, that Jan Nepomniachtchi is the winner, and he will face Magnus Carlsen in November for the world title. I can't wait. It'll be very, very exciting. I think we have two players with rather different styles. But anyway, back to the tournament. It was such a long tournament that I just wanted to remind you of Jan Nepomniachtchi's play throughout. I should say that, well, all the games are over now. Nepo won with 8.5. Second, Maxime Vachier-Lagrave with 8. And then Anish Giri and Fabiano Caruana on 7.5. Liren, Grischuk on 7. But as I said, I'd like to take you through all Nepo's 14 games played in this tournament, just very briefly. And of course, you can look at the full videos that I recorded, well, some over a year ago, if you want the full details of this game. But I just want to remind you of his journey and also his strengths, what he brought to this tournament. Why did he win? That's the question that I want to try and answer by looking at these games very briefly. So, let me take you back to the 17th of March 2020, St. Patrick's Day, and the first round of the candidates tournament in Yekaterinburg. And Nepo had black against Anish Giri. Well, there you go. It turns out that this was a game that was decisive. One wouldn't know it. But it actually, with Nepo winning this first game, it did have a big effect much later on in the tournament, because Giri knew that he would always have the worst tiebreak, because the first tiebreak is done on individual scores. Anyway, this first round was extraordinary, this first game. Giri against Nepo. Now, I'm just going to zip through the first few moves. Basically, this was a highly theoretical opening, but well, I say highly theoretical. Both players were obviously in their prep for some time. It's incredibly sharp. And I think this first game for both players showed that both Giri and Nepo had come to this tournament absolutely armed to the teeth with theoretical novelties, with new ideas. Both players obviously working incredibly hard. And this line, I mean, they're already on new territory, but it was quite clear from the time that the players were taking that Giri was more comfortable. And I think what's extraordinary is that Nepo, obviously, he's been caught. He's been caught in a prepared line. He's under extreme pressure. So here's how the game went. Bishop e2. Bishop takes an exchange sacrifice. Giri still moving very quickly. And then king f1. So this is a position after 19 moves that Giri was obviously very familiar with. He's got a safe king. Come to g2. He's got the two bishops. He's got a rook on this semi-open h-file. And black's king is definitely insecure. I mean, it's a very unstable position. I say unstable, but really only for black. This is a very unpleasant position to defend. You know, white is going to play g5 to rip open the position. But what was incredible was that Nepo found his way through the complexities of this, turned the game around completely, and actually achieved an end game that was winning for him. And he showed incredible technique to win this endgame, which looks as though white has a fortress, but he found, I mean, he was playing this so quickly, he found a way to win this position. He managed to create a Zugzwang position here and managed to bring his king over to win the h-pawn. And then he moved his king all the way back. to this position, and then this wonderful winning move, Queen d3, which forces an entry into the position for the king. And, well, here Giri resigned because, of course, you can't take the queen. The pawn will go through. So just in this first game, and I should say, again, if you want to see details of that, then do check out my video. You'll find links in the info tab and the video description for all the games I recorded. This first game showed for me, well, that Nepo has incredible strength of character to come back from a really difficult opening, but also fantastic technical ability. And this was my nomination for Game of the Year 2020. Sadly, not everyone agreed with me in my end of the year poll, but I thought that was an outstanding game. So that set the tone. So round 2, Nepo against Grischuk. Now this was a Berlin, and a very theoretical Berlin. They reached this end game, and after 16 moves, well, this has all been seen before, and Nepo played King h2, and again a very complex position. In fact, Grischuk defended extremely well, and finally the game burnt out to a draw in this opposite colour bishop's endgame. But again, it showed that Nepo had come to the tournament very well prepared. Even though this one didn't pay off in the end, he was ready to test his opponents, basically. So, but also, I think that showed that if things didn't work out so well, he didn't go into self-destruct mode. In that game, he steered the game towards a draw, and that's okay. Losing is the problem in candidates tournaments. That can set you back. And here, big surprise, Game 3 against Kirill Alekseenko. And Nepo, with the black pieces, plays the French, and not even the classical variation, which is reasonably solid, but the winnower. This shows that he's taking incredible risks. The winnower is actually quite a rare visitor at the top level. But it showed that, he was prepared to really go for it. And this was not a smooth game by any means. And probably Alekseenko was better at some point. But it finally ended in a draw by perpetual check. A really crazy game, actually. And, yeah, ended in perpetual check. Like that. So he was on 2 out of 3 at that point. And then a Grunfeld against Fabiano Caruana. So Nepo is a huge Grunfeld expert. But interesting, he was prepared to test it out against Caruana. And Caruana, well, I think that's why he played d4 in this game. He was ready. And, well, they reached a very typical Grunfeld endgame here, where White still has the centre. Caruana had managed to advance this h-pawn up the board, and White has this nice central majority. This is a tough position for Black, and Nepo had to really dig in to defend this one. So in this position, this pawn on h6, creating a mating net, but also a target with the pawn on h7. The advanced d-pawn. And that's 2 big pluses for White in this position, and a pretty safe king. And I remember at the time thinking, well, Caruana has a fantastic chance to put this one away. Looks really, really strong. But what gritty defense from Nepo. Queen a5. Okay, looks slightly odd, but watch what happens. Queen d1. defends the pawn and threatens to push. Bishop d6. g3 creates some luft for the king. And now king f8. And this is absolutely crucial. The king runs away. And, well, the game went queen f3 and ended in a draw. Crucial move is queen d4. Watch what happens. King here. Now, if queen g7, queen takes, and this ends in a draw. f3 is actually a mistake. Or at least, yeah, it is a mistake. That bishop drops, the bishop is now loose. And king h2, that's a draw by perpetual check. Now, to work that out from afar, and there are other variations there as well, is certainly not easy. So, yeah, this game, again, shows Nepo's real grit, confidence that he can find a way to defend these positions. So that was round 4. And here is where in round 5 he scored his next win. And, well, we know that Nepo is a very fine attacking player, very creative. But he's, in this game, a Petrov with a symmetrical pawn structure. He showed that he could be technically superb. And this was a fantastic strategic squeeze. This line is known. And, well, you can see a symmetrical pawn structure. And it takes a lot of effort to actually squeeze anything from this position. But I tell you what, this was a brilliant performance. And, well, this h-pawn came up the board. And even though, you know, on a good day or with a computer, black might be able to defend this position, Nepo managed to find a way through. He got his queen in, so he's combining threats against these pawns with threats against the king. And Wang cracked here. And this is a fantastic move. f4. So this is where Nepo's calculation comes in. You know, if you're going to play a move like f4, exposing your own king, you have to get this absolutely right. So first of all, if queen takes pawn, queen e8, mate. And the game went knight takes pawn, check. So there was a little bit of repetition here. And now queen d8. That's the killer move, threatening queen d6 and threatening the knight. And the only defense is here. And after this, white wins a knight, and that's game over. So that was brilliant. So that was Nepo's second win. Round 6. Again, a highly theoretical opening, a Spanish against Liren. Nepo took him on in a main line, and this position with queen d7, this is a speciality of Ding's. But Nepo found a way to complicate it, and, well, an incredibly difficult game with this passed pawn, but Nepo's king exposed a little bit, you know, in danger. But he finally managed to win this with, well, some brilliant moves. You know, as I said before, he's a very creative player, and he managed to calculate a way through. That knight on g1 covers the f3 square, and, well, this was winning for white. These are the final moves, and, well, he managed to exchange queens. But, I mean, really complicated game. Do check out my video on that if you want to see the details. But yeah, such concentration needed. And then, well, so he'd won 3 games. 3 out of 6 games on 4.5 out of 6, leading the tournament. And then he faced Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. And again, he played the French. Now, maybe this was one outing too much. he repeated this line of the winnower, and well, Maxime came to the board well prepared. Actually, Nepo was probably okay in this game. Round about here, he thought for about half an hour, and I suspect that he was still in his prep, or at least was roughly familiar with this position, but it was just too complicated. He went wrong, and well, let's just see what happened. I mean, I've mentioned this in my Candidates Part 2 preview. It was a brilliant performance. A4, of course, a typical move in the winnower, making room for that bishop on d2. And this was a superb technical performance from Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. So that bishop now on this crucial diagonal, and it knocked out that knight. And g4 ripped open black centre, basically. Brilliant win from Maxime. So that was after 7 rounds, and Maxime Vachier-Lagrave and Jan Nepomniachtchi were sharing the lead. Then we had our little suspension of the tournament for unfortunate reasons. And, well, we came back just a couple of weeks ago, and the tournament was resumed on the 19th of April. So a year and a month after the tournament had first started. I mean, it's extraordinary, and so much had taken place. And, you know, that year and a month, that was a test of nerve for all the participants in the tournament. I mean, really difficult, you know, just difficult for everyone in the world in this year. And for these players to hold their nerve, even just to concentrate on preparation on the tournament during this time, incredibly difficult. So this was game 8. Nepo against Anish Giri, of course, absolutely crucial, because Giri was only a point behind, and Giri had obviously been working incredibly hard, as results showed in these first few games. He was much improved, and he came out with the Sveshnikov. Fantastic, a bit of opening preparation basically in this year. Now, you know, the Nepo of a few years ago might have done something rash here, and you know, you can easily lose if you get it wrong. But here, he was very pragmatic. He decided to play one of these lines that is just very, very solid, and he didn't push it too far. And basically, in this position, well, it's roughly level, and yeah, he went for a repetition, which was absolutely right. There's, you know, you can try and squeeze in this position, but actually, it's not justified. Black is fine here. And very pragmatic, very sensible. Drawing was okay in his position. Losing would not have been okay, but drawing was all right, particularly when it's against one of your rivals as well. You know, that keeps them down too. So, very pragmatic. And now, well, again, we see some grit in round 9 against Grischuk. So he risked the Grunfeld again, and Grischuk played, well, an unusual line with h3, and after these moves, okay, it's a pawn sack. Well, okay, Nepo gives the pawn back. Well, of course it could be taken, but Grischuk wants to play for the initiative. And here, Nepo was under severe pressure. But again, grit pulled him through, and he managed to hold that game. So this resilience, I can't really emphasize how important that is. You know, these games are a test of their opening knowledge, their middle game play, their end game play, obviously. But it's a test of character too. And Nepo came through with flying colours. So now, on to round 10. after a couple of draws, Nepo wanted to target the weakest player in the tournament, Kirill Alekseenko. And he did that, not by playing sharp lines with e4, but instead, probably very unexpectedly to his opponent, he played something very calm. Basically, a kind of Reti Catalan. And that completely threw Alekseenko, who somehow right from the beginning was obviously very uncomfortable. He was thinking about all his moves, a few minutes over all these moves, and very quickly played an inaccuracy, bishop e7. And after just a few moves, he had a very poor position. That bishop on g2 is an absolute monster. And Alekseenko never freed himself satisfactorily, and when it came to the crunch, Nepo is a fantastic attacker, and he recognised that he could switch his forces to the king side and started a direct attack on Black's king. And once he took on h7, that of course was game over. So very efficient targeting of the weakest player in the tournament. Round 11, he was white against Caruana. Very pragmatic. He knew that Caruana needed to win this game. So what did he do? He played one of the most solid e4 openings, the 4-knight Scotch. And honestly, creating anything of interest in this position is, for Black, extremely difficult. And, well, Caruana tried, but got absolutely nothing, and was even, had to work a little bit to draw this endgame. But, well, it was a draw. But very pragmatic from Nepo, and very good tournament tactics. Basically, he reserved his energy for the weaker players in the tournament. That's what you do in these kind of round robins. And this was fascinating because Nepo played the Petrov against Wang Hao. It's a repeat of the opening in the first half of the tournament, except this time Nepo was Black. So, no French defence. He's thought better. He had a year to think about it, and he's playing the Petrov. And this was so clever. And, well, again, Nepo just held his nerve in this position. Was happy to go into this endgame and completely outplayed Wang Hao. Little by little, I should say. And yes, as someone on the channel said, when I mentioned this knight was the hardest working piece in professional chess, and as someone on the channel mentioned, this should be called the James Brown Knight. So let's christen it. It is the James Brown Knight, the hardest working piece in professional chess. Check out James Brown live at the Apollo, that classic album, the hardest working man in show business. So here we go. What did that knight do? Well, let me try and zip through this game incredibly quickly. First of all, it came around to b6, where it induced a little weakness here, b3. And then it shifted round to e6, where it drove the bishop away. And then it helped with that c5 break and put some pressure here. And then, in a moment, it shifted round to d6. And then when we got to this endgame, it didn't stop. It still had some work to do. Well, okay, basically it managed to shift around and, Wang Hao resigned before the knight could actually deliver the fatal blows. But that knight, and Nepo's play in this game, absolutely superb. So that was Nepo's win in round 12. Then well, round 13. So we had this steady opening from Nepo, and Vachier-Lagrave tried to shake things up a little bit. But, well, what was clever about this from Nepo's viewpoint was that he had an eye on the Grischuk Giri game. He kept an advantage all the way through, but didn't stir it up too much. So he knew that he could play for a win if he had to, but basically kept it incredibly solid and, yeah, agreed a draw, well, by repetition in this endgame. He could still play for a win, but he didn't need to. And it was this draw that secured his victory in the tournament. Then we had the debacle of the final round. That was a bit unfortunate, but as he said, you know, he was just, his motivation had gone basically. But I'd be interested to see that opening again. It was a fine opening from Nepo. But it's interesting how the same thing happened with Giri. You know, the two players that were in contention, Nepo and Giri, they both blew the final round. So there you go. I hope you enjoyed that little journey through Nepo's candidates tournament. Just want to emphasize, you know, what he got right here. Theoretically incredibly well prepared, but also prepared to deliver some surprises as well, like the French, for example. And that Petrov too. Gritty defense, incredibly resilient. So, you know, it's not as though he didn't come under pressure, but it's how you deal with that pressure, and he dealt with it brilliantly. Technically, he was superb. You know, think about his game, well, his 2 games against Wang Hao, actually. Brilliant technically, you know, with that squeeze. And in the very first round against Giri, he showed, I think, excellent judgment. He knew when to stick and when to twist, when to play a sharp opening, when to steer things, you know, calmly towards a draw. That judgment, you know, sensing the right moment to push it in a game and when to just hold back, that is incredibly important as well. So there we go. Those are the kind of characteristics that he will need when he faces Magnus Carlsen in the World Championship match in November in Dubai. Thanks for watching.